In the modern history of football, the goalkeeper is usually viewed as the last line of defense, a safety net, a calm presence behind the chaos. But Oliver Kahn was never a safety net. He was the chaos. To the strikers running at him, he wasn't just a man in gloves. He was the first predator they had to survive. Referees hesitated to book him. Opposing fans brought bananas to the stadium to mock him, only to watch him feed off their hatred. But the most terrifying truth about Oliver Kahn isn't how much his enemies feared him. It is how much his own teammates feared him. There is a legend that circulated through the locker rooms of the Bundesliga in the late 90s and early 2000s. It was an unwritten rule among the young players of Bayern Munich: don't look him in the eye. When the whistle blew, the dynamic on the pitch shifted. If a defender made a mistake, if a midfielder lost possession, their first instinct wasn't to look at the scoreboard or the manager on the touchline. Their first instinct was to look back at their own goal in terror to see if Der Titan was coming for them. To play in front of Oliver Kahn was to play with a heart rate of 180, not because of the match, but because of the man screaming behind you. He didn't just command his area, he patrolled it like a caged animal testing the strength of the bars. We have seen him grab his own defenders by the jersey, shaking them until their teeth rattled. We have seen him sprint 40 yards out of his goal not to clear a ball, but to scream into the face of a teammate who dared to lose focus for a single second. The media called him Volcano the Volcano. They painted him as a man with zero emotional control, a madman who operated on pure, unadulterated rage. But does a madman win 8 Bundesliga titles? Does a madman single-handedly drag a mediocre national team to a World Cup final? To dismiss Oliver Kahn as simply crazy is to miss the genius behind the growl. Why would a professional athlete attempt to bite an opponent's neck during a match? Why would he launch a kung fu kick at a striker? This video isn't just a compilation of red cards and angry outbursts. It is a psychological profile of obsession. We are going to dismantle the myth of the beast to reveal the cold, hard logic underneath. What looked like madness to the outside world was actually a sophisticated, calculated psychological weapon. Kahn learned early on that in the brutal world of elite sports, fear is a currency. And if he could make everyone, the opponent, the referee, and yes, even his own teammates, terrified of failure, he could control the outcome of the game. The screaming wasn't a loss of control. It was a shield. It was a mechanism designed to hide his own crippling perfectionism and the paralyzing fear of letting a ball slip through his fingers. But to understand the man who wept at the World Cup, we must first survive the monster who ruled the Bundesliga. Up next, we look at the specific moments of violence that defined his career, from the vampire bite to the karate kick, and ask, was he trying to hurt them, or was he trying to wake them up? To truly grasp the scale of Oliver Kahn's ferocity, we must transport ourselves to the Westfalenstadion on April 3, 1999. In the history of the Bundesliga, there have been thousands of matches, but this specific game between Borussia Dortmund and Bayern Munich stands alone as a monument to one man's psychological unraveling. It was the day the Titan became the vampire. Bayern was trailing 2-0. For a perfectionist like Kahn, losing wasn't just a result, it was a personal insult. As the minutes ticked away, his behavior shifted from competitive to predatory. In a moment that has been replayed millions of times, Kahn found himself in the box with Dortmund striker Heiko Herrlich. As they entangled, Kahn didn't push him away. Instead, he leaned in, pressing his face against Herrlich's neck. To the cameras, it looked bizarrely intimate, but then came the snap. Kahn opened his mouth and attempted to bite into the striker's neck. It was a primal, animalistic gesture, a visual representation of a man who wanted to consume his opposition. But he wasn't done. Minutes later, Stefan Chapuisat, another Dortmund forward, made the mistake of entering Kahn's territory. Kahn came rushing out of his goal not to block the ball, but to send a message. He launched himself into the air, extending his leg in a flawless kung fu kick that flew inches past Chapuisat's face. Had he connected, it would have been a criminal assault. It was a move straight out of a martial arts film, executed in the penalty box of a professional football match. The world was horrified. The press called him a lunatic. But Kahn's reaction after the match revealed the dark humor that protected his psyche. When asked to explain his violent outbursts, he didn't apologize. He didn't hang his head in shame. He looked at the reporters and deadpanned, "The coach told us we had to bite the opponents today. I was just following instructions." It was a joke, but it wasn't funny to the men who had to share a pitch with him. Thomas Brodaric, a striker for Bayer Leverkusen, later recounted a story that perfectly encapsulates the fear factor Kahn projected. During a match Brodaric scored against Kahn. Instead of accepting the goal, Kahn chased Brodaric into the locker room tunnel after the whistle, grabbing him by the neck. Brodaric admitted years later, "I was afraid for my life. I thought he was going to kill me." Kahn wasn't playing a character. He was using physical intimidation to ensure that no one felt comfortable scoring against him ever again. However, if opponents were terrified, his own teammates were often paralyzed. This brings us to the philosophy that defined his leadership style, encapsulated in 4 German words that became a cultural catchphrase: Eier, wir brauchen Eier. Translated, it means balls, we need balls. Kahn believed that in the high-stakes world of elite football, talent was secondary to courage. If he sensed weakness in his own team, he attacked it with the same ferocity he used against the opposition. He viewed fear as a necessary tool to sharpen the senses. If his defenders were afraid of him, they wouldn't make mistakes. The most infamous example of this tough love occurred involving his teammate Andreas Herzog. During a heated moment in a match where the defense was faltering, Kahn didn't offer words of encouragement. He sprinted from his line, grabbed Herzog, a grown man and a seasoned international player, by the shoulders and shook him violently like a rag doll. He was screaming into his face, eyes bulging, veins popping. He was physically assaulting his own teammate to wake him up. To the modern viewer, this looks like a toxic workplace environment. It looks like bullying. But in the context of that Bayern Munich era, it was accepted as the price of victory. His teammates knew that Kahn demanded perfection because he demanded it of himself. Yet the fear was real. Mehmet Scholl, a Bayern legend and one of Kahn's longtime companions, summed up the atmosphere of that dressing room with a quote that is as funny as it is terrifying. "There are only 2 things in life I am afraid of: war and Oliver Kahn." But where did this rage come from? Was he born this way? To decode the Volcano, we have to look at the immense pressure of his position. Unlike goalkeepers like Iker Casillas or Gianluigi Buffon, who were blessed with supernatural reflexes and natural grace, Oliver Kahn was a product of construction. He wasn't born a genius. He built himself into one through obsessive manic training. He knew he had to work harder than anyone else to be number one. This insecurity fueled his intensity. He created a mental fortress where everyone outside of him was an enemy trying to take what was his, and the world was happy to play the role of the villain. Throughout his career, Oliver Kahn was the enemy of Germany. In away stadiums across the Bundesliga, opposing fans subjected him to relentless abuse. They mocked his appearance, his broad shoulders and jutting jaw, calling him a gorilla. They would throw bananas at him from the stands every time he approached the goal. For a lesser man, this racial and physical abuse would have been crushing. It would have broken his concentration. But Oliver Kahn did not break. He did something extraordinary. He metabolized the hate. In one iconic moment, as bananas rained down around his goal line, Kahn didn't complain to the referee. He didn't walk off the pitch. He calmly bent down, picked up a banana, peeled it, and ate it while staring down the crowd. Then he went back to his line and made a save. It was the ultimate power move. He was telling thousands of screaming fans, "Your hate nourishes me." He turned the negative energy of the stadium into fuel for his performance. The more they hated him, the better he played. He needed the conflict. He needed the war. Without the pressure, without the madness, Oliver Kahn might have just been a good goalkeeper. But by embracing the monster the public wanted him to be, he became the titan they couldn't destroy. He was a man who lived on the edge of a cliff, constantly screaming into the void to keep himself from falling. But as we are about to see, even titans bleed. And the higher you climb on a ladder built of rage, the harder you fall when the silence finally comes. Up next, we leave the Bundesliga and travel to Yokohama 2002 to witness the moment the monster finally became human, and why the greatest goalkeeper in history ended up alone, leaning against a goalpost with blood on his lip and tears in his eyes. If the 90s defined Oliver Kahn as a monster, the summer of 2002 revealed him to be something far more tragic: a man. To understand the depth of his fall, we must appreciate the height of the mountain he had climbed. The German national team entering the 2002 World Cup was not the terrifying machine we know today. They were a squad in transition, arguably one of the weakest German sides in history. They had struggled to even qualify, relying on a playoff to reach the tournament. Pundits wrote them off, but they had one variable that no other team possessed. They had the Titan. Throughout that tournament in South Korea and Japan, Oliver Kahn didn't just protect the goal. He carried an entire nation on his back. He was Atlas. In the 6 games leading up to the final, he conceded only a single goal. He was a wall of pure kinetic energy, making saves that defied physics and screaming his defenders into shape. He was so dominant that he became the first and to this day the only goalkeeper in history to win the Golden Ball as the tournament's best player. But Greek tragedies are written so that the hero is destroyed by his own strength. And Kahn's tragedy unfolded in Yokohama on June 30th, 2002. It was the World Cup final against Brazil. Ronaldo, Rivaldo, and Ronaldinho, the greatest attacking trio of the era, were knocking at the door. For 67 minutes, Kahn held them at bay, playing with torn ligaments in his ring finger, refusing to show pain. But then, the unthinkable happened. Rivaldo fired a low-driven shot towards the goal. It was a difficult strike, but for Oliver Kahn, the man who caught flies with chopsticks in training, it should have been routine. He moved to gather it, but the ball, slick and heavy, slipped from his grasp. It bounced off his chest and rolled just a few feet away. In the cruelest twist of fate, the ball fell perfectly into the path of Ronaldo Nazario. The Brazilian striker didn't miss. 1-0. The stadium erupted, but inside the penalty box, time seemed to stop. Oliver Kahn, the man who demanded perfection, the man who terrified his teammates if they made a single error, had just made the biggest mistake of his life on the biggest stage on earth. He had been perfect for 6.5 games, only to be human for one split second, and that second cost Germany the World Cup. When the final whistle blew, Brazil celebrated their 2-0 victory. The German players collapsed. But the image that is burned into the soul of every football fan is not the Brazilians lifting the trophy. It is the image of Oliver Kahn. He didn't run to the locker room. He didn't yell. He walked over to his goalpost, sat down, and leaned back against it. He sat there alone, surrounded by the debris of his shattered dream. He looked small. The volcano was extinguished. With blood on his lip and a 1,000-yard stare, he looked like a king watching his empire burn. It was the moment the world stopped fearing him and started to feel something they never thought possible for Oliver Kahn: pity. It was a picture of absolute loneliness. The goalkeeper is the only player who cannot hide. If a striker misses a chance, he can score 5 minutes later and be a hero. If a goalkeeper drops the ball, he is a villain forever. Kahn sat there for what felt like an eternity, bearing the weight of his own philosophy: no excuses, only balls. However, this moment of vulnerability wasn't the first time Kahn had shown his humanity. It was just the first time he had shown it in defeat. To truly understand the heart beating beneath the goalkeeper's jersey, we have to rewind 1 year prior to the 2001 Champions League final. That night in Milan, Bayern Munich defeated Valencia on penalties. It was the pinnacle of Kahn's club career. He made 3 penalty saves in the shootout to win the title. When the final save was made, the stadium exploded. His teammates rushed towards him in a frenzy of joy. But watch the footage closely. Kahn doesn't join the pylon. He breaks away from the celebration. He walks over to the opposing goalkeeper, Santiago Canizares, who has collapsed on the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. Canizares had lost his mother during the tournament and was now losing the final in the cruelest way possible. Kahn, the beast, the man who bit necks and kicked players, knelt down beside his rival. He put his arm around Canizares, whispered into his ear, and tried to comfort him while the rest of Bayern partied. Why? Because Oliver Kahn knew. He knew the loneliness of that position. He knew that the line between the hero and the failure is razor thin. He recognized a brother in arms who had given everything and lost. In that moment, he wasn't a German or a Spaniard, a winner or a loser. He was a member of the goalkeepers' union, offering respect to the only other man in the stadium who understood the pressure. That gesture earned him the FIFA Fair Play Award, but more importantly, it completed the portrait of the man. The rage, the shouting, and the intimidation were real, but they were also a uniform he wore to go to war. Beneath the armor of the Titan, there was a man who felt the pain of the game more deeply than anyone else. He was a monster because he had to be, but he was a human because he couldn't help it. This duality is what makes his legacy so enduring. But as his career wound down, the rage began to cool and the Titan began to evolve. Up next, we look at the final chapter of Oliver Kahn, how the man who once terrified the world transformed into the wise elder of German football, and the final lesson he left for a generation of players who have forgotten what it means to bleed for the badge. The most shocking twist in the Oliver Kahn story isn't a save, a bite, or a scream. It is his metamorphosis. If you watch Oliver Kahn today appearing on German television as a pundit or looking back at his tenure as the CEO of Bayern Munich, you will see a man who is unrecognizable from the Volcano of the 90s. He is articulate, calm, intellectual, and possessing a dry, self-deprecating wit. He wears tailored suits, speaks softly, and analyzes the game with the precision of a professor. Where did the beast go? In recent years, Kahn has offered a glimpse behind the curtain of his own psyche, revealing the truth about his on-field persona. He admitted that the madness wasn't just a personality trait, it was a survival strategy. The aggression was a shield, he reflected. The pressure at Bayern Munich was so immense that if I had relaxed for even a second, I felt I would be swallowed whole. He realized early on that he couldn't be nice and be the best simultaneously. To survive the abuse from the fans, the demands of the media, and the weight of history, he had to construct an alter ego. He had to become the Titan. The screaming wasn't just to intimidate others, it was to drown out his own doubts. He sacrificed his likability to ensure his invincibility. This brings us to the ultimate legacy of Oliver Kahn. In an era of modern football that is increasingly sanitized, where players are media trained from childhood, where rivals hug in the tunnel before kickoff, and where a brand image is often more important than the final score, Kahn stands as a monument to a different time. He represents an era where character was more valuable than technique. He teaches us a harsh but necessary lesson about leadership and success. To be truly elite, to be number one, you cannot be everyone's friend. Leadership is not a popularity contest. Sometimes the leader is the one who is willing to be the villain in the room, the one who demands standards so high that it makes everyone else uncomfortable. Oliver Kahn didn't play to be loved. He didn't play to be a meme. He played to win. And he was willing to be bitten, bruised, hated, and feared to get there. As the lights go down on his career, we are left with the image of the 2001 Champions League final. Not the saves, but the celebration. We see a man who had spent 120 minutes looking like a wild animal finally collapsing into tears of joy, hugging his teammates with the same intensity he used to shake them. He was the last of the gladiators, a man who turned the penalty box into a coliseum and refused to let anyone, friend or foe, leave without a fight. So I leave you with this question. When you look back at his career, do you see a madman who lost control, or do you see the greatest, most focused goalkeeper in the history of the game? Would you want a teammate like Oliver Kahn screaming behind you? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you miss the days when football had a little more fire and a little less PR, please like and subscribe for more deep dives into the legends of the game. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. Thank you for